Welcome everybody. Welcome to the last day of Ndlovu Film Festival. My name is Ntombiga Yise. Welcome Angela Lowe. Welcome our media production. Portia, welcome. Hi.
Hello.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us. I'm just waiting for Tapiwa to join us.
And it's my honor to be sitting in this roundtable as a host with producers, because I think as directors, we often, have challenges in understanding how best to, relate with producers and how best to work together as a collective in telling beautiful stories. And also, the question on the table today really speaks to the issue of development funding and how it is very important to make sure that it is accessible and that it is made possible to help in developing content that is relevant and that will have a social impact. So with that question on the table, please introduce yourself before you speak to the issue of how can we best look at proper content development from your perspective as producers. So let me start with Angelo. Angelo, how are you?
Good morning. I'm a little bit cold. It's raining up in Joburg today. So
is it? It's pretty warm in PMB.
It's always warm in PMB. I miss PMB, to be honest. I worked in PMB for about a year, 10 years ago. I worked at The Witness. So I lived there and I really enjoyed it. And I hope that life would bring me back that way so I can have good weather all the time. So I am a digital mobilization officer at Greenpeace Africa. And so it's my job to kind of engage people around issues, environmental issues in creative ways. And that's how I got to producing my first documentary, which was called Gutted, the Fight of Kalk Bay Fishes, which is in this festival. And sort of speaking to the issue of developmental funding, what I did find was I struggled to secure a production team to make this documentary on the budget that I had. I found that in terms of, this is my first documentary, by the way. I have done little videos by myself here and there, but this was my first real attempt at storytelling. And I found that with the budget that I had available, that I didn't have enough to cover all the components that I needed. I would need in a production team, and filmmakers are familiar, is that you need sound technicians, you need people who are researchers, you need so many different aspects to it. I'm lucky that I came from a nonprofit background where we kind of make do with what we have and the resources that are available. We always try and make light of it. And also in producing this, I happened to find a freelancer because one of the production companies came back to me and they were quoting me around 100,000 Rand to do this, which is not preposterous considering the amount of people that would need to get paid through the process of producing a documentary like that. But they were like, you're not going to get anybody, you're not going to get a team ready to be able to do this. But then they recommended this freelancer. And I thought that this was that's one of the opportunities that we have in terms of like digital storytelling, is that there's a lot more pressure. Well, it's an opportunity, but also it's a pressure on creatives to be a lot more versatile. So I worked with a director who not only directed, but was the storyteller. So he had insight on how the story needed to flow, but he was also a cameraman and also one of the best editors that I've ever met, because it just, everything about this documentary was beautiful. And it was because he was sort of leading the way in terms of the cinematography. But had I had a bigger budget, it probably would have ended up as an hour-long feature instead of the 8 minutes that it turned out to be. And so funding is a very important thing, especially when you want to tell stories that are important like this, that are affecting communities at a grassroots level. Should I pass over to somebody?
I would like to hear other people's views, but in the meantime, you brought up two, I think, two important issues there. The issue of budget, and the issue of, for me, the issue of one director ending up playing multiple roles, because you don't have enough money to hire a production team so that everyone focuses and specializes in their area. And I think I would like to follow up on those and how eventually it affects the quality of the production, and how everything works out at the end. But yeah, let me welcome Yolisa to the roundtable. Yolisa, you're welcome. So the question we're discussing is the question of development funding and how easy or difficult it is to access it, and what it means to work without enough funding for the development of film. What's your take on that?
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Yolisa. So with me, I'm still very new to, I guess, the producing world. I'm a recent graduate, so I didn't really have to put myself on, like, go to the very extreme end of the spectrum and talk to production companies and funding companies. I was still more or less working within small fundraising, methods of funding the film. But I'm more interested to hear like what people with experience have, because I'm still new. I'm still learning. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing that experience. But can you speak a little bit about your experiences in terms of the fundraising that you did, and what you think some of those challenges you faced in terms of fundraising, and how, if there was a readily available fund, what difference do you think it would have made, and how would that change the vision of the production of the work that you have done?
Right. So initially in the conception and curation of the story, it was initially a very dense kind of storyline. When we were talking with our with our lecturers on just the concept, it was written more in the mind frame of like a feature film. So obviously on a student budget, we did have to condense a lot. But in terms of fundraising, what we did was, apart from crowdfunding, which we didn't really get a lot of money from there. It was mostly from like friends and family that we talked to. But a the bulk of fundraising we were able to do was through monthly film fundraisers. So as students, we were aware that there's a lot of people that enjoy going out and whatnot. So we came up with this monthly film fundraiser where we would host like film art and short film screenings from other film directors who were students, and then incorporate like selling like different foods, bake stuff, like drinks, and just like homemade kind of food to invite more people to come. It was a day event, and yeah, we also had because our director was a DJ. She had a lot of connections with other people who were DJs, and they would come. We would have alternate people who would perform for a small fee that we would compensate through some of the funds that we were able to raise, and that was something that we did continuously throughout pretty much the whole of our graduation year in 2019. To fund both our experimental and our graduation films. But I do think that with a huge budget, it definitely would have made a lot more difference to like what the initial aim of our project was, and just being able to realize a lot of the ideas that we had. But yeah.
All right, thank you, Elisa, for that elaboration. You also do again there allude to the issue of creatives having to play multiple roles, being a DJ, being a director, and how that at the end of the day sometimes help with connections. But I want to, on that note, come back to you, Angelo, and make a follow up on first how you, because you said you had a budget, and when you started putting together the production team, you knew that it wasn't going to be enough. How did you produce, how did you get the budget for this production? Was it self-funded? Did you get money from a production company? How did you go around that? And then I would also like you to speak to the issue of multiple roles within the production team, a director having to be, a storyteller and an editor and having to wear many caps.
So in terms of this, I was very lucky. It was a story that I'd been aware of for a number of years, and Greenpeace, the organization that I work for, they had a campaign that was running. It was a global campaign, and they were asking for local content issues that were related to harmful industrial fishing in the oceans and the impact that that had on local communities. So there was a budget available just through my employer. Yeah, so I didn't necessarily have to go around looking for it. The struggle for me, though, was to kind of get somebody who would accept that. And I was lucky, and I think that this is an important thing, is that the director that I worked with, he, director slash a camera person slash everything else that he was, cinematographer, editor. The I was lucky in a sense that he understood the importance to our community as colored people, what kind of impact that it would have to tell a story on a global scale. And it has had quite an impact to a point where some of those that were unfair that we were highlighting changed in the space of a year. But I think what is important to note, apart from the fact that there are lots of late nights, it's really unfortunate that when you are a person of color in filmmaking or in any kind of industry, that there's a lot less buy-in to the projects that you pitch that are related to you. And it's a struggle I think we're all going to find, is that people don't necessarily see this type of storytelling as marketable. And I think that's one of the biggest setbacks in getting buy-in and in getting funding, is because people just view these types of stories as irrelevant, like it's not going to be popular, it's not going to resonate with the bigger crowd. Oh, if you're going to make a movie speaking to people in Afrikaans, how are people in Britain going to understand it? In New York, are they going to understand it? So I think there are definitely biases that at play when people of color are making movies. The other thing, there was something that I wanted to say, is that as a media practitioner, it is so unhealthy, just at a personal level. You get exhausted, you suffer from burnout. Never mind the quality of your production, is that you have to work harder to get the standard quality to be able to broadcast all over the place. For television to pick it up, you need a certain quality of product. And so you end up burning out as an individual. And I think it really takes its toll on producers and filmmakers. By the end of that project, I was in hospital. I literally burnt myself out in hospital. And I think that that's unfair. And I recently went to the Joburg Film Festival, and I saw movies that were of less of a quality to mine, that were heavily funded. I think one of the other gain is knowledge of how to access the funding from, the IDC or from, the Film Authority, because there are funding opportunities available. I think that when you're new to the industry, first of all, people don't know you, so they're not likely to trust you with funding. And also, you just don't know how to access that funding.
All right, thank you, Angelo. Portia, are you here?
Yes, I am here, but I'm not part of the discussion.
I know, but I would like to rope you into the discussion. I'm using my powers here as the host. Specifically because listening listening to the two producers that I've spoken to already, I'm getting a sense of um, lack of information on how to access funds. I'm also getting the issue of there's a need to, I don't know, to make the funds accessible in a different way. But from your experience, having produced and having hosted and run this festival for 2 years, what observations have you made in terms of from your discussions with the filmmakers, how they've accessed funding or the lack of, and how does that translate to the quality of the work that you have seen, that you have had to vet and select for this festival?
Okay, thank you. When it comes to film funding, whether it's the short documentaries or it's a feature film, it's been very difficult from filmmakers when we hear from them having to come to us for help, and you would explain to them we are just a festival to exhibit the films that are already made. We don't do funding, and they would tell us it's very difficult to get funding because when it comes to funding, there are tiers. We've got tier 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5. And all those tiers have got requirements that you have to meet. And for an aspirant or entry-level filmmaker, it's very hard to meet up the demands of those tiers. Because with tier 5, you only qualify for training. They train you in that tier. With tier 4, you qualify for a short film. And when it comes to feature films, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's from tier 3 downwards, or you must have produced and exhibited theatrically or otherwise 2 short films. So when it comes to funding, having to meet up with the requirements that are needed for the funder or the investor or the grant, it's very difficult for filmmakers. So with these tiers, I think with the filmmakers from our festival, their concern is they do not have enough information as to, if you talk of tier 1, what are you referring to? If you talk of tier 2, if you're saying I must have a training of a year to qualify for a funding for a short film, where do I get that training? So that's where we come in as a festival to say, okay, fine, you are looking for a training. Maybe we can manage to set up something with our funder to see if they'll be able to fund for a training. We call those outreach programs because they are free. So they fall under outreach programs where we would offer trainings to up and coming aspirant entry-level filmmakers to say, come and train. Then when it comes to funding, then go and swim with the sharks. It's very, very difficult.
Thank you, Portia. So you have mentioned again, and I think you are emphasizing and reiterating the issue that has already come up from a discussion of number one, lack of information in terms of how to access funds that are available. And then the second issue that I would like to perhaps speak to briefly is also the issue of how difficult it is to access the funds, even if when you know. And I think that speaks to the issue of compliance and the issue of the requirements and the conditions under which one can qualify for funding. So I don't know if anyone would like to speak to those two issues, to say, if it's a question of information that people are lacking, how best can we as creatives, as make it our business to educate young producers, aspiring producers in our different communities about how to access the funds that are available, and also to help them understand the different type of, in terms of compliance, what are the requirements and how best to, to work themselves through the ladder to be able to get to a position where they can access the funds for production.
A gift, was that question directed to me, Angelo?
Okay.
I'd actually be very curious to hear from Yulisa around, because I mean, like you've been trained just very recently, and if like, do the academic institutions make you aware of how to fundraise and the different fundraising avenues that you have? Like, is that something that they teach you at film school? I'm not a film school graduate. I'm actually a journalist by profession. So I'm not even sure if any of the multimedia classes that I've done over the many years that I've been doing them, if they even qualify for that, fifth tier of training and all of that. So that's not something that I am very familiar with.
Right. So so my major at AFTA was producing. And I will say that I would say that they did try to educate us on how to fundraise and how to, I guess, approach people with fundraising, as in teaching us how to do like pitches, elevator pitches. And they informed us of things like DTI and rebates. So there was some information that was provided. I think obviously it's a very I want to say it's dense information to like understand when you're still new to the industry. And I think a lot of it relies mostly on putting that into practice and implementing it and actually going, and approaching these companies and learning, how to and how not to, what works and what doesn't. But I will say that, yeah, I would say they did try to prepare us as best as they could in terms of the industry and making, trying to get yourself to be successful in that regard. But yeah, I still have to put those into practice and work and see, what I need to do and what works and not and whatnot. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. And it's, I think it is the Internet of Things. The information is readily available on different websites. If you Google, film funding in South Africa, something will pop up and you'll be able to follow it through. But I think there is always an issue sometimes with people getting lost in vision. What does this actually mean and everything? So always, I think a lot of conversations happen between the seasoned producers who are already in the industry. I get the consensus that film funding and development funding is very necessary and very important, particularly in the current landscape in film development, in production, to make it available and accessible, so that films, be it feature films, be it documentaries, short stories, will begin to transform, will begin to grow, because people are really investing in the process, and we begin to get a more fully fledged production where everyone who is working as part of the production team is really specializing in their field, and there is a really big collaboration, because the more expertise you have on a production, and the larger your production team is, and the more the specialization is involved and incorporated in the production, the better the quality is. So from the storyline, from the script itself, if it is workshopped, if it is edited properly, before you even do the casting, when the casting is done, that a lot of money is spent and invested in ensuring that you get the best for each production. So that's what I'm gathering from this conversation. And I think I don't know if there is anyone from the team who wants to say maybe their final words to conclude within these 10 minutes, and see if we can also take a question or two from the audience.
I'd like to just also add that it's not just about the quality of the production. As creatives, people need to eat. Do you understand? Like
Absolutely.
the funding models should be able to enable a good quality life in the production. People don't go into film and put in all the hard work, late nights, all the studies, so that they can be broke at the end of the day. I think there needs to be a much larger into our arts and into our filmmaking. You know, you look at Hollywood, you look at Bollywood, these are film industries that are, you know, exporting culture all over the world and are making lots of money for those respective countries that they're from. And so, you know, there was a time where South Africa had made a very big cash injection into our arts and for some reason have scaled back. But we need to do that if we're going to really be successful in establishing this industry in South Africa.
Well said, Angelo. Thank you so much for bringing that perspective. Yolisa, I see you're nodding your head there in agreement. Do you want to say one or two things following up on what Angelo just said?
No, I 100% agree with what he was saying. I think there is, I mean, South Africa is a hub of culture and there's so many stories to share. It's only a matter of us having the means to do that and showing how, you know, how multifaceted South Africa is in terms of like story and everything. So I completely agree with what he was saying, and that needs to be put more on the forefront.
Here you have it, ladies and gentlemen. It is, in essence, very important to invest in film and production to make sure film development funds are available and accessible, so that the quality of our projects and our productions, the story, and that also each and every person who works on the project production is remunerated accordingly, and you know that one at the end of the day is taken care of financially. So Ntombi, from your side there, I don't have access to the numbers. Can you check if there are any people online who would like to ask a question or make a comment within the next few minutes that we still have? We've also established that there are quite a lot of new and upcoming producers who are struggling with information. We're struggling with, you know, how do we access development funding? What sort of development funding is available and where? And how do you go about it? There is information about who qualifies for what and what are the requirements, and the issues of compliance also came up in our discussion. I was just asking our panelists to give us their final, you know, words before we can open up to our audience to give us questions and their contributions as well. Yolisa has not yet joined, but Angelo, is there something else you would like to add on, or you know, emphasize and reiterate on, you know, from what we've already established so far?
I suppose I could go on and on and on about the importance of sort of adequately funding a project. You know, and I think it is really important when discussing the issue around people taking on multiple roles. While it is good for skills development to be able to know how to edit sound and to be able to know how to actually story tell, you know, that's great, but it doesn't really allow people to specialize in a particular type of thing that makes them excellent at it. You know, if you, and also it's just kind of like a scatter of focus. If you are doing 2, 3, 4 roles in any type of production, how are you meant to really just invest yourself into this one thing that makes it perfect? I was actually just thinking as you were speaking around, you know, investment and like how you kind of get what you pay for. A lot of the time, what I'm beginning to notice in like local productions is particularly with acting skills. You know, it's always good to give people their big break or whatever, but I'm finding that you have these full scale features that make their way into cinemas where you have to compromise on certain things. And I feel like sometimes people are compromising on like actors, for instance. You find that not getting the right types of actors or not being able to afford the right caliber of actor for your production really makes it fall flat, and then you keep putting out an inferior product simply because you couldn't afford that thing. You couldn't afford the right sound technicians. And so the I mean, you see that like a lot of our productions have this fuzzy noise or some, you know, like you need somebody who's going to be able to do the sound and then the post-production sound. And then, you know, there's just so many components in making a good quality film that I think people just maybe underplay or just they don't understand the scope of the work. And that's probably why it's never really taken that seriously as a profession, because people just think it's something you do when you pick up a camera and write a script.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Angelo. I think you have really put it out in very clear terms. I know from experience how one project that we worked on for quite some time, and we believed in the project, we believed in the quality of the story, and the acting was good. And when we were, you know, working on the editing, we started picking up, you know, some, you know, very serious challenges in terms of the quality of sound, in terms of, you know, it was really pretty much irreparable, and without which movies will continuously suffer from weak storylines, from, you know, um, substandard, you know, editing work, from poor locations, from, you know, the quality of work in every aspect, be it costume and wardrobe and makeup. You know, I remember working on a production where we didn't have, you know, enough money to pay for a professional makeup artist, and we had to go and look for someone who says, I do makeup for events, I do makeup for weddings. But when we started working with them, we realized that they needed to understand the difference between makeup that they do if you're going to, you know, to take a photo at a party, versus the makeup that we need for the production. Does it serve the purpose of the story? Does it speak to, you know, the character? How do you make that makeup work for the story and for the production? So it is a reality that film and TV has the potential to bring so much income, to bring so much money into the economy, to inject a lot of money back into the economy. But as long as the quality of productions that we releasing is substandard, then we can't sell, we can't market them, we can't really expect to get returns from them. So it's really important to ensure that development funding is available, that it is you know, also allocated and used accordingly to develop talent, to upskill, you know, practitioners, to help people acquire new skills and further improve the quality of their work. And that is the only way that we're going to go back and really celebrate you know, the success of our film industry in South Africa. So yeah, on that note, Portia, do we have anyone online who would like to engage with us, whether in form of a question or a comment?
Yes, Gift. I would just
Oh,
like
Yolisa is back.
to, yeah, welcome, Yolisa. Yolisa is on now.
Is back, yes.
Yes. I'll just like to talk about the importance of development funding, how it can really turn a lot of things around in terms of like producing proper or good quality content. I think I'm trying to phrase my question like it's in my head, and I'm trying to phrase it. Okay, I think funding institutions should actually have, when you go to loan or get a business loan, they give you business consultancy that will be helping
Yes.
that company. I think I've experienced that with ITC. ITC, if they fund you, they will there will be money just specifically for the consultant to making sure that the money that has been granted is spent accordingly. So I think the funding institutions in the
Yes.
film industry, they need to have business consultancies when it comes to funding development funding, because that is needed, and without funding, I mean, we will continue seeing poor quality when it comes to film. So I just wish that even our government needs to take this industry very seriously, like overseas, to have like a proper budget just specifically for I think things will be different. Production, it's just has a lot of people that it can employ. So when people look at a film, they're thinking, it was just like few hours. It's hours, days, months in order just to produce like an hour film. So
Absolutely.
government, yeah.
What is the development? When you are saying you are developing your film, producers, what exactly are you doing? What is it that incorporates the development of the film? That is the question.
Okay, Portia, thank you for the question. Angelo, would you want to respond to that one first?
With my limited experience, I've kind of learned that the development is more so the scheduling, making sure, like figuring out the logistics of how you're going to get this right, who you're going to need to work with to enable things. For instance, in my research team, I had a small research team of volunteers to find some of the stories in the Cape Flats community. And if I had not had a female on the team, and this is also why representation is so important, but if I had not had a female on the team, we'd have not have gotten interviews with the cleaning ladies on the shore. This was a documentary kind of focused on the fishermen or the fishers in the community, but it wasn't focused on other people that are involved in the supply chain. And so I would have never had that female perspective that doesn't speak about just how it impacted livelihoods of people, but how it also, that broader perspective of how this issue impacted like family and family units and the role of women in society. And so in terms of production, it's literally finding out and piecing together who are the necessary people, how you're going to actually find the money to be able to achieve all of that, and working out the timelines, working out the distribution models. Like that, I think is what it is encompassed in production of a film. It's not just about sitting down and having an idea and making it come to light. You can make a film, but if there aren't avenues or places for people to watch it, then what was the point of making it in the first place? So it really just encompasses the success of the film altogether, the promotion of the film. You sit in roundtable discussions like this because you want anybody who's online to go and click on the link so that they can see this thing that you put your heart and soul into. And so I think that in terms of a producer, it's complete oversight of every aspect of it. It's not, I suppose it's not just sticking to one role, it's the quality checking, it's all of that. Yolisa, do you have something else to add to that?
So I think just to add to what you were saying, with logistics in mind, from like scheduling and planning and locations and everything. I think another really important thing is to just think about just why you're making the film and the message you want to communicate. Because in doing that, you can start to think about, okay, well, who do I want to target with this film? And then from there, it's like, okay, these are the people that I need to speak to, I need to approach to make sure that the right people are seeing this film, and can resonate with it. So yeah, that's something also that's important in the whole development of a story.
Okay. Thank you for those responses. I did, I don't know what's wrong with my connection. I did miss parts of your contributions. But I think to just add on to what I've heard from you guys, when you're talking of film development funding specifically, I think it's pretty much, we're talking about money, funds, and resources. But funding can also come in form of resources. For example, providing equipment, cameras that are needed, lighting equipment, sound equipment, or providing technical skills, or the infrastructure. We have editing studios, we have editing suits, making those available and providing them to filmmakers, and so that when they make films, when they get into
But what I would like to add towards film development, when we talk of development, from my experience, you had to have a full script that is written, whether it's a short film or it's a feature film or a documentary or any kind of a film that you want to do. You need to have a script. When I'm talking of a script, I'm talking about, you write your story on an A4 page, like you are writing an essay telling your story, and then the development is to tell you, Guti, this is the format that we're looking for, these are the locations, this is how you need to phrase your writing, this is how you talk to characters. And if film development also helps you with knowing, you do your synopsis. A synopsis is where you tell maybe 4 or 5 lines about your story, and then there's something called a treatment. A treatment is an overview of your story, maybe in 4 or 5 pages, to tell us where is the story taking place, with whom the story is taking place with, and what and where. So that is what we talk about when we talk of a film development. There's a lot that is incorporated, because we've got a pre-production that involves you going to look for people, talking of directors, talking of a producer of your film. Maybe you are just a writer, you don't know anything about financing the film. So you go look for a producer and director. So when you talk of development, the funding that is needed is for those people to say, I'm looking for a producer for my film, and I'm looking for a script editor to edit my film, so that when I'm submitting it to investors and funders, when they read my script, at least it would make sense to them in terms of business language. So I think that is one of the things. There's more of information regarding development, but that is a gist of the development funding.
Oh yeah, like something that I'm finding increasingly important these days is to kind of like diversify funding, because I feel like a lot of people give their energies to one source and they think, oh, I'm going to go to the IDC and they're going to fund my entire project. It doesn't always happen that way. What I've realized is that people will fund projects that already have some sort of funding, so that they'll cover a certain cost of it. And I think that you shouldn't compromise on the quality of production just to ensure that you can have, try and find these different sources of revenue and different sources of funding, so that you can really upscale your production and the quality of it. We shouldn't let funding and lack of funding really limit the scope of our imagination. And I think that that's something really necessary in South Africa, so that we don't keep telling the same stories over and over and over again.
Yeah. So basically, just with the last point that you you brought up, Angela, about not having, repetitive storylines. I think also it allows for like complacency in terms of the big productions, and the same, there's no real challenge to tell new stories and provide different perspective. And at the end of the day, film is a collaborative industry. So as much as we, work together as freelancers in whatever respect, in the industry, from editing and sound, or makeup, whatever the case may be, I think in that same regard, we should, like what you said, just try to be resourceful in terms of funding, and not just approaching one person, like one entity, for funding. So making sure that we're really trying to diversify, and diversifying our funding, and approaching as many companies and entities as possible, to really maximize and optimize the potential of really fleshing out the story that we want to create, and having it have the impact that we want it to have.
All right. I'd like to thank you all for taking your time for us guys to discuss the challenges and the experiences you have as producers. And thank you, Yolisa, for sharing with us your experiences. Even though they are limited, you've got limited experiences because you just entered the industry. I'd love for you, Yolisa, to just give us a brief background about the movie you have produced that has been selected here at the festival. Just for 30 seconds, give us a synopsis of your movie and tell us a little bit about it, as well as you, Angelo. And that will be your last words. After that, we'll be done with the discussion. And thank you so much to KZN Film Commission. Thank you so much to Umsunduzi Municipality, Umgeni Water. Thank you so much to all the sponsors that have come through for us to make sure this is taking place. So over to you, Yolisa. Just a brief about your film. What is it about? And then that will be concluding this discussion, as well as you, Angel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So basically, my graduation film is called Insight. It's a short psychological drama, and it's based in dystopian Cape Town, following a sex worker and a blind homeless man who connect and start to confront some of their internal traumas, and just internal hardships and personal hardships that they're dealing with, to really try and actualize. And really, the controlling idea was this idea of embracing pain, or confronting pain and trauma, to be able to reconcile and find peace within oneself.
Okay, so my short documentary called Gutted the Fight of Kalk Bay Fishes deals with the plight of the Kalk Bay fishing community on the Cape Flats, and how harmful industrial fishing has really led to the depleting of their livelihoods and caused the deterioration on the Cape Flats. And I would really appreciate it if you guys watched it. And feedback, of course. Find me on social media, Angelo Silo, on all platforms. I'd really, really appreciate the feedback.
The same love movie is about a homosexual child. It talks about the things that families go through in terms of not accepting a homosexual child. So okay, we're actually going to be cut off now. So yes, please enjoy it. And yeah, thank you so much for this time. Thank you so much.